A healthy mother and a healthy father have three children: one daughter who is unaffected, one son who is unaffected, and one son who has red-green color blindness. The parents are asking how their son could have the disorder if neither parent has it. On the MCAT, this is the exact kind of genetics question where you might think instantly it's just a recessive trait and stop thinking after there. The important thing is to define what is actually going on here, such as where the gene's located, which parent passed which chromosome, and why males can express certain recessive traits with only one copy, which females don't. We'll come back to this at the end of the video and walk through it step by step. In this video, we're going to cover sex-linked inheritance, X-linked recessive and dominant inheritance, Y-linked traits, hemizygosity, as well as pedigree symbols, analysis, carriers, transmission, and the different patterns of skipping generations. Sex-linked inheritance exists because not all genes are on autosomes. Autosomes are on non-sex chromosomes. Our sex chromosomes are X and Y. Females are usually XX and males are XY. A sex-linked trait is controlled by a gene that is located on the sex chromosome. Most MCAT sex-linked inheritance questions are about X-linked traits instead of Y-linked traits because the X chromosome carries far more genes and is much larger and more relevant. Now, one of the most important topics here is hemizygosity. So a crucial difference is that females have two X chromosomes and males have one X and one Y. Hemizygosity means a male has only one copy of X-linked genes, which is denoted by the hemi prefix. If there is a disease on the X chromosome, if the female has another X chromosome that does not have the disease, almost all of the time that will mask it. However, if a male has a disease on the X chromosome, there's not another X chromosome to mask it, meaning he will have that disorder. So an XX will be usually unaffected by an X-linked recessive disorder, whereas a male will be affected. A female with one normal allele and one recessive allele, in this case would be the diseased allele, is referred to as a carrier because she doesn't have it and express it phenotypically. However, she can carry it on to the next generation. This is why when we have X-linked recessive, it is much more prevalent in males. And females are typically unaffected, but they may be carriers. Where would this diseased X chromosome have come from, though? If we set up a Punnett square of the sex chromosomes between the two parents, let's say this is the diseased chromosome that's circled in red, we will have this individual that's a carrier because they're a good X and a diseased X, and then we'll have this individual with one X and the Y being affected. So the female will be the carrier because she still has that healthy X chromosome. The male will be affected because he does not have anything to mask it. And then for the other two possibilities, we will either have a healthy female or a healthy male. But let's flip it and let's see what the Punnett square would look like if the father is the one that's affected. So if we were to draw another Punnett square, but instead let's make the father's X have the diseased and the mother's, both of our X's are healthy, we will see one female who has one healthy and one unhealthy. That makes her a carrier. And another female would have the exact same thing. And then if we look at the males, both are going to be a healthy X with the father's Y. So if we have an X-linked recessive disorder, that will always be from mother to son, and it will never be a father to son transmission because the son will receive the Y chromosome from the father and the X from the mother. Now let's compare the same thing but with an X-linked dominant inheritance pattern, where the one disease allele on the X chromosome is going to be dominant. So again, if we make the disease chromosome, let's put a capital D here on the female, that female will show. Regardless of what happens with the other X chromosome, since it is dominant, it is enough to make the disease show phenotypically. So we will not have this masking effect where the female ends up being a carrier rather than actively expressing the disease. If it is X-linked dominant, any individual who has that X chromosome will end up showing it. Obviously, the male, since they only have one X chromosome, regardless of if it's X-linked dominant or recessive, they will show it. What's important to note, and especially when we talk about the pedigree charts, is that if we're X-linked dominant, we will not skip generations. So a parent will be showing it, and then that child will then show it. We will never see one generation showing it, the other one not showing it, and then seeing it in a third generation coming up again. There is always going to be a continuous succession of the X-linked dominant trait appearing. Now, if we're X-linked recessive, this has the potential to skip generations, because if we only have females, or if the part of the pedigree that we're looking at has females, the female, like we said, can be a carrier, where they can then give it to their son in the next generation, but their mother prior and them were not expressing it. So if we had to summarize all of these points, X-linked dominant will always show. If you have the disease chromosome, you will show this disease. X-linked recessive, typically only males will express this allele. Females, unless they have two diseased chromosomes, they will be a carrier, and then they can skip a generation because they don't have it, but they could give it to the next generation. So that's the next point. It never skips generation for X-linked dominant. X-linked recessive can skip. X-linked dominant affects females too. And like we said, X-linked recessive typically only affects males. But this is for the X chromosome. Though it is more common to see these types of problems with the X chromosome, we still have the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is only passed from father to son. A male is XY. The father is the only individual who has the Y chromosome, so that is where the male offspring gets that chromosome, and then it receives the X from its mother. So if we have a Y-linked disorder, that is present 100% of the time. If the father has the Y-linked disorder, the son will 100% have it and express it. 0% of the female offsprings will have it because they do not have a Y chromosome. Now let's talk about pedigrees. There's a couple important symbols to know when you're looking at a pedigree chart. First, if we have a square, that's a male. If we have a circle, that is a female. Usually the mating of a male and a female will be denoted by a male and a female next to each other with a line attaching them together, and then a line coming down spreading to however many offspring they have. In this scenario, let's say that there's 3 offspring. So their offspring are going to be 2 females and 1 male. For whatever allele or gene that we're referring to, if we see either a square or a circle filled in, that means that the individual is affected. If we only see half of a circle filled in, typically for females, that means that they are a carrier. So to look at sex-linked inheritance patterns, we always want to see first who is affected. After that, we want to see, is it primarily males? Is it only males? Is it males and females but at a disproportionate rate? Or are both of them affected at a somewhat equal rate? We also want to check if the trait skips generation. And then we want to assign the genotypes based off of what inheritance pattern makes sense. So before we look back at the original problem at the start of the video, let's look at this very simple example. We have two unaffected parents and an affected son. So it's easy to say that this is autosomal recessive, meaning that both parents are heterozygous and they have each one recessive allele, and the son just has both recessive alleles. That could be possible, but what if that's not an answer choice and we have to go off of something else? So it's important to note that the affected individual is a male. If the affected individuals are mostly male, X-linked recessive could be a possibility. Now we also want to see if there's father to son transmission. Here's the father. He does not have this disease, whereas the son does. So we know it's not a Y-linked disorder. That means the son must have gotten his affected X chromosome from the mother. We can say that this mother is going to be XA, XA. And from that, the son received the X little a. We know that he must have received the little a and not the capital A because the mother is unaffected. If this was X-linked dominant, then he could have had either one, but the mother would have had it regardless. Since she doesn't, but we know she's a carrier because the son has it, that means that he received the X-linked recessive allele. The son is expressing this recessive allele because he has no second chromosome to mask it, unlike his mother. Now, if we said that females can be carriers, why can't males be carriers? Why can't the dad be a carrier in this case? For X-linked recessive traits, males cannot be a silent carrier. If their only X chromosome has the recessive disease allele, they have to show that trait. So to summarize everything that we talked about our X-linked inheritance patterns, our X-linked dominant will not skip generations. So if we have 3 generations, which we didn't see in the previous example, we must see it present in all 3 generations. If there's an affected father, he will pass it to all of his daughters, but not to any of his sons. And the mother will pass it to all her offspring. Whereas for X-linked recessive, only the males are affected, and females either will not have it, or if they do, they will be carriers, and phenotypically they'll be unaffected. This can also skip generation for that very reason. And then we have Y-linked, where it's only a father to son transfer, and it will happen 100% of the time. Now let's return to this original problem. We have our healthy mother, so that's a unshaded circle, and a healthy father, that's an unshaded square, and they're going to be connected by the line. They have 3 children, so let's branch that out 3. 1 unaffected daughter, so that's just a circle. An unaffected son, that's a square. And an affected son, so that's going to be a shaded in square. The easiest one to identify is if we have a Y-linked pattern. That means that the father transmits it to all of his sons. Well, the father is here, and here are the 2 sons. Of the 3, only one of them is affected. So it is not going to be Y-linked. Now we have to see, is it X-linked dominant or recessive? And how do we know for sure? We said if it's X-linked dominant, the mother will show. The mother is unaffected. It says in the problem that she's a healthy mother, and we didn't shade her in. That means that she does not have this trait. She could be a carrier, but she is not actively expressing it. The one son does have it. We know that an X-linked dominant, all 3 children are expected to have it. So based off of this, we can tell that this is going to be X-linked recessive, similar to the previous example. But it's also important to note that there's another son that's not affected. If we know that there's only 1 X chromosome and the mother is a carrier, why does only one son express it and the other one doesn't? Well, that's because if we were to draw out what her alleles would be, she would be an X with a healthy A and an X with an unhealthy A. And we'll say the healthy A is the capital, unhealthy A is the lowercase. The affected son must have been X lowercase a, Y. Whereas the unaffected son must have been X capital A, Y. Which is why only one of the sons is affected and the other one is not. To see more videos, click on the playlist on the screen. Thanks for watching.